Authority Records and Copyright Determination. I'm Eva Sorrell, a member of the ALCTS Continuing Education Committee, and I'll be your host for this afternoon's webinar. Our presenters today are Matt Carruthers, Metadata Projects Librarian at the University of Michigan Libraries, and Kristina Eden, Copyright Instruction Librarian for the University of Michigan Copyright Office. Matt is a NACO-trained cataloger and creates and transforms metadata in support of library and university projects. He has experience with name authority metadata in both bibliographic and archival contexts, utilizing MARC and EAC CPS, and he was a team member of the Remixing Archival Metadata Project, RAMP. Kristina leads the training team for the Copyright Review Management System, a series of 3 IMLS National Leadership Grant projects based at the University of Michigan, which have collectively identified more than 239,000 public domain works. She helped initiate the pilot project to send author death dates found during the course of copyright review to NACO-certified catalogers for updating authority records. Their presentation will include how authority record data supports copyright determination and the impact that enhanced authority records can have in the identification of public domain works. Just a few things to keep in mind for today's presentation. Today's webinar does not have interactive chat capabilities. If you wish to comment on today's presentation using Twitter, you may use the hashtag you see on the screen. We will not be moderating the Twitter feed. If you have questions for Matt and Kristina, please type them into the question box on your screen and they will answer them as time permits at the end of their presentation. Questions which remain unanswered while on the air will be answered off-air and the answers sent to all attendees. This webinar is being recorded and you will receive an email with links to the recording, the presentation slides, and an evaluation within 2 days. Please take time to fill out the evaluation form since it will be used by the committee to plan future events. There may be a slight delay as I turn the presentation over to Kristina.
Thank you, Eva. My name is Kristina, and Matt and I represent a collaborative workflow between the Copyright Review Management System, also called CRMS, which does copyright determinations, and the Technical Services Department at the University of Michigan. The catalogers there add the author death dates that we find during copyright review to authority records. So I lead the training program for copyright reviewers on the grants, and Matt is metadata librarian, so he's going to be talking today about the cataloging aspects of our collaboration. Together we're going to share our experience with you today on the context of how our program identifies public domain works, where authority records play a role in copyright determination. Matt will demonstrate how we update NACO authority records with author death date and nationality information that we collect during copyright review. And we'll show you how you can get involved and make an impact. Now, we know some of you might be hands-on learners, so we have prepared for you a link that is in the chat box. We'll also show it to you at the end of the presentation, and it's a shortened URL, goo.gl plus extra, and it leads to an open spreadsheet which has over 100 names of authors and death dates that we have found during copyright review. So if you are somebody that is a hands-on learner and wants to take a look at that and follow along as we're demonstrating updating NACO records, feel free to do that. And you'll also have the opportunity to do that after the presentation is over. The spreadsheet will still be available, and we'll be talking more about that later. So our copyright checking work revolves around the 12.8 million scans in the HathiTrust digital library. Probably a lot of you are familiar already with HathiTrust. If not, It is a community of over 80 institutional partners, several of whom have also contributed time and resources to our copyright review project. And I know that some of you listening on the webinar today are HathiTrust members and may know people at your institution working on the copyright review project. And I want to give a shout out. I know that our copyright reviewers at Minnesota are listening to the webinar today, and also at Princeton. So thank you very much. Any other of our copyright reviewers on the call today? They do fantastic work, and they're really doing great work finding public domain books. So the HathiTrust contains a lot of Google digitized material, but also locally digitized, and some by Microsoft and the Internet Archive. It's currently print, books, and journals, but may be expanded in the future to include audio and born digital formats, so as a publishing platform. About 37% of the total volumes are in the public domain. And because of our experience in working with the collections of HathiTrust, we realize that many other digital repositories are grappling with rights issues right now and what can be made openly accessible. So like DPLA, Mountain West, Digital Library of the Caribbean, and Europeana. Not only is there increasing collaborative digital collection building, we're also seeing a more collaborative environment for cataloging and a changing perception of how authority records can be used. For example, I was just listening to a webinar the other day from OCLC on their report of registering researchers in authority files. And the purpose of that is to get a better handle on scholarly output and to have sufficient information to uniquely identify authors. I kind of feel like we're doing the same thing. We're just doing it for historical authors and collections to help get a better sense of what is public domain. So here's the viewability breakdown for HathiTrust collections. At the rate at which books are ingested into HathiTrust, we would never be able to keep up by doing a manual copyright review. So at onset, they get a preliminary bibliographic determination to set their viewability and determine whether the full text can be made open. This is the point at which the bib record becomes important. The fields such as publication date, country of publication, and indication of U.S. federal authorship play a part in making a machine-readable public domain determination. And currently for worldwide, we're using the date 1874, or 140 years after date of publication, as the bright line by which we consider the likelihood of a existing copyright term before that date to be pretty low, and so that's the date at which they're opened without manual review. So this first pass identifies many public domain works. However, it doesn't get all of them. A number of potentially public domain books remain closed because we're lacking relevant data or it requires further research. And I wanted to mention that even though some of the books are closed and unviewable, HathiTrust still makes whatever legal uses are available for in copyright books, such as being able to search the text, and that's called limited view search only, or making them accessible for people with visual disabilities. The ones that are in copyright or unknown, though, just simply can't be opened for full view, full text. So our copyright review process looks for public domain works that can be opened up, and by doing this we're enabling a better knowledge of what is public domain, which in turn helps us be better and responsible stewards of library collections and to make those collections publicly available to the greatest extent possible. I need to take a moment to thank the Institute of Museum and Library Services for our project funding. With their national leadership grants, we were able to develop and implement the software for large-scale systematic copyright review in 2008. In 2011, we expanded to include review of non-U.S. works, otherwise called CRMS World. And in December of this year, we will continue the current work as well as package our processes into a written toolkit for other libraries to adopt. So while we're giving recognition, I need to thank our partners in the copyright review work. This also gives you a sense of scale of the project. We have 18 institutions. 4 that are starred were the ones who have been on the project since the very beginning. We have over 50 people doing copyright review, and we will be adding 12 more, training them at the start of December of this next month. So for more information about our process and resources, we have that available on our grant website, and we'll share the URL for that with you at the end of our slides. So since 2008, our project has reviewed over 410,000 books, which means we've looked at 410,000 bibliographic records with an eye to copyright determination. Today, we're not going to be talking about our copyright checking process or the decision tree we used to make public domain decisions. You can find those on our website. Instead, today we're going to be talking more specifically about how authority records play a part in our work. So within our CRMS interface, we've run 2 main projects, US and CRMS World. So I'm showing these to you to set the stage for the data that we need from authority records. On CRMS US, we were looking at publications between 1923 to 1963, which according to US copyright law required publication with notice and a copyright renewal registration. These renewal records we look up in the Stanford Renewal Database. And if there is no renewal record, then the work is potentially public domain. However, the authority record data that comes into play here is author nationality. So nationality and associated place have an impact on whether the U.S. copyright for the book was restored through international treaty. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later. For CRMS World, we're examining books from the UK, Australia, and Canada. And for these countries, the copyright term is based upon the author death date. Together, these 2 pieces of information are the ones that we are looking for in an authority record. So virtually all copyright terms around the world are based on a formula of author's life plus a certain number of years gives you the length of the copyright term. And to calculate when a book enters the public domain, you must know the death date for the author. So for this particular book, 60 Years of Bookman, it was published in London. The UK gives a copyright term of life plus 70 years for a personal authorship. So Joseph Shaler died in 1923. And if we do the math, we find that the book is public domain. So that's kind of a simplistic rundown of a copyright determination, but you get the idea. Barring any third-party content or other complicating factors, this book is public domain. So we've been finding really that there have not been many, if any, copyright terms existing prior to 1900. So there's a period between, if you recall that bright line date, 1874, there's a period of, I don't know, maybe 20 years in which really many things are likely to be public domain, but without a review, we're missing that ability to open them up. So, machine-readable records. Why are machine-readable bibliographic and authority records important to us? Or, in other words, why do enhanced authority records really make a difference in getting at public domain works? Well, for our purposes, it really speeds up manual review of copyright. In many cases, we could not reach a copyright determination without data in an authority record. We're doing over 4,000 reviews a week. And reducing the amount of time that we spend clicking around in databases and going through the open web is really very important to us. So we rely upon tools to automate our death date search as often as possible. When we realized, the point at which we realized that we could automatically bring in an author death date from our catalog records was like a light bulb going off. Whew, yeah. So we get 56% of our books that we look at pull in a death date automatically from the Library of Congress name authority file. Our programmer was able to make a fuzzy search capability that will then go out and try to match an author name in VIAF, and we get an additional 9% of death dates through that. So data in bibliographic and authority records can work together as useful tools in budgeting and planning a digitization project. If any of you, if your institution is thinking about a particular collection that you want to review the copyright for and put online, it has the potential for scoping a project. So if you know, for example, that you have authorship in that collection where at least one author has a death date that continues to put it in a copyright term, you may want to try to filter those out when you're creating the pool of works that you're intending to digitize. So it has impact and potential for scoping and filtering, metadata, using it to drive digital collection development, and the better we have copyright relevant metadata in authority records, the better we can plan and use our collection resources. So the Virtual International Authority File, or VIAF, is by far our best resource for searching for author death dates. We do a pre-populated search to it, and the authority records available through this resource have been a game changer for us, not only for the author death dates, but for foreign nationality. So because of this, all of the author death date and nationality information that we collect and add to Library of Congress name authority records, we are doing this because it's apparent that these authority records have been immensely helpful to our copyright determination, and the new author information that we're turning up should be shared in a place such as VIAF that makes copyright determination easier for the next person. So getting back to author nationality and why it's important for us, for any authors suspected to be non-U.S., their literary works would be restored to copyright by the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, also called GATT. In copyright review, this affects U.S. publications between 1923 and 1963. So even if they failed to follow formalities according to U.S. copyright law, such as renewing their copyright registration, if there is foreign authorship, the book potentially can have restored copyright in the United States. So take, for example, this book, Interplanetary Flight by Arthur C. Clarke. This was the U.S. edition, published in 1951. There was no renewal registration. However, Arthur C. Clarke, being a UK author and dying in 2008, still has a continuing copyright term in his home country, and therefore GATT potentially is restoring his U.S. work to copyright in the U.S. despite failing to follow the U.S. formalities of the time. So what this means for us with authority records is that we've been able to program in our search interface an automatic alert that will tell us when there is potential for foreign authorship. This is in our review project of U.S. books. Some European libraries have been including nationality information in their records for a while, and under RDA, NACO allows it in the Mark 370C field. So our reviewers receive an alert when non-U.S. nationality is in VIAF, or for an author, or for an added entry. And this means that our copyright reviewers are less dependent upon personal knowledge or clues from the publication in hand to determine nationality, which is not always easy to catch. So the most common crossover we see are UK publications reprinted in the United States, and the clues in the book in hand in the front matter can sometimes be very minimal that the U.S. edition in fact has a British author. So the more nationality data or associated place data added to authority records and then to VIAF, the better for our copyright determination. So here's what our review interface looks like. As you can see here, we have a death date that's automatically being ported in from Zephyr, which is the HathiTrust catalog of record. This data is coming from the Library of Congress Name Authority file. The left sidebar contains our tools and our links out to resources, and the right pane is the digital scan of the book. And I'm going to show you a short video to illustrate the interface in action. So when we're checking a book for copyright, we have loaded into our interface a number of resources that go out and were recommended for being able to check for author death dates, including Wikipedia. This one is taking us out to a pre-populated search in VIAF. We can then click through and check the record. We try to find 2 sources for each death date to find a corroborating source. And so this can take us out to the Library of Congress authorities and check it there. And once we've found 2 sources, we will also page through the front matter of the book, and this is looking for third-party content or any other things that we have specified that would add a complexity to the copyright determination. So, and then our reviewers leave notes about their sources, and we choose a various category, and then we submit the data, and we're storing that data. So moving on, if you are interested in the sources we use for checking author death dates, we have a white paper on our grant site. The URL, again, will be shared at the end of our presentation. And this is from the Library of Congress recommending sources for us for Commonwealth author death dates. Our standard searches are in VIAF, Archives Canada, COPAC, Wikipedia actually is very good, and the new General Catalog of Old Books and Authors. We tend to favor open, non-subscription resources simply because of the logistics of having many institutions on this grant project. So as we submit the copyright review, we are storing that data in our own database. Like you see displayed here, this is kind of rather a data silo. It only associates that author death date in a one-to-one match with one particular volume that was reviewed. So the next time a book by that same author comes up, we have to look them up again. So we felt that it was important to begin contributing death dates to a place where they optimally propagate to bibliographic records, so that we only need to do the work of searching for the death date once. Depositing our discoveries of author death dates in shared authority records is the optimal place, which gives us a universally accessible way to retrieve them, and it's also a way for us to enhance the data that's been so helpful to CRMS. So I want to also point out here that the examples on this slide are from a small subset of Spanish books that we reviewed in collaboration with the University of Madrid Complutense. So it was from their project on rare and forgotten Spanish texts. It was a set of about 900 volumes with Spanish authors, such as Emilia Pardo Bazan and Gaspar Núñez de Arc. So this project was kind of it was testing out certain concepts. The majority of our work is done by random, so our books are served to our copyright reviewers in a random way, and there is no real way to try to review all the books by the same author at the same time. So in this project, we were attempting to do an author-centered copyright review, and we would do all books by that author at the same time. Having non-English language works and having authors in which the death dates, if they were not in an authority record, we would have to be going out and searching Spanish language resources. We kind of really realized that there are some areas in which we need the help of specialists. So Madrid Complutense actually was very helpful they did some searches in Spanish newspapers, El País and others, and were able to provide author death dates to us. And we also realized that they had death dates in their local library catalog. That was a useful place for us. So there are places in which specialists definitely can help, particularly I think that if you have a set of regional publications, places where you are more likely to have knowledge and be able to find that author and identify vital statistics for them, that is definitely a place to consider enhancing authority records and adding author death dates. So I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague Matt, who will show you what we are doing to add author death dates and nationality information to enhance NACO authority records.
Thanks, Kristina. So I'll be taking you through some of the more nitty-gritty cataloging details, starting with why relying on bibliographic records alone isn't necessarily ideal for copyright determination, and why authority records serve as a better vehicle for information relevant to copyright. And then I'll take you through our local workflow for updating NACO records as part of the CRMS review process. Now, from a cataloging standpoint, there are a number of reasons why bibliographic records aren't really ideal for the purpose of tracking and administering the copyright status of the books on our library shelves. Necessary information like author death date, collaborator death dates, so anyone like an editor or an illustrator, country of publication for the sake of that country's copyright laws to apply, and even the exact date of publication are not the focus of cataloging rules and may not be entered or maintained in bibliographic records at the level we need for copyright determinacy. Now, most institutions have a basic minimum level record that includes author, title, and publication data. But catalogers are limited somewhat by what they can include in the record by, one, what is on the resource in hand, something that has been relaxed slightly in RDA, but also what is acceptable according to cataloging standards and rules. So, for example, historically, only one place of publication needed to be recorded for a resource in bibliographic records. So relevant data for copyright determination could be omitted, even though the record would meet cataloging standards. And this data was never intended to supply copyright evaluation needs in the first place. And in many cases, the focus was on the minimal effort for the disambiguation of content rather than its complete description. And I have an example here that illustrates that point. So on the left, you'll see the title page from the Stories of Sherlock Holmes, published by Harper & Brothers Publishers in 1904 in both New York and London, so two separate countries simultaneously. But if you take a look at the corresponding MARC record on the right side, you'll notice that only New York is listed as the place of publication in the 260 and the 008 fixed field. Now, according to AACR2 and RDA guidelines, catalogers only need to record one place of publication. And it was even Library of Congress policy for a long time to only record the U.S. place of publication if multiple places were listed on the resource. So you can see how relevant data from a copyright standpoint can be omitted from bibliographic records. And that's especially important for us to know since copyright laws vary by country, and we also use that information in the CRMS review process to filter our candidate pool of resources to search. Now, common errors in bibliographic records can also present problems. One common error is that the data in the variable fields and fixed fields can sometimes conflict. This can occur, for instance, with dates. The date can be correct in the 260 field but be different and therefore incorrect in the 008 fixed field, or vice versa. And this problem can actually be exacerbated under RDA. New RDA rules call for transcribing without correction whatever information is on the piece into the 245 and 264 fields. In AACR2, the cataloger would put the corrected info, if it was known, in brackets after the incorrect info on the piece. But corrected information in RDA, however, will be noted in a 500 field. And you can see an example of this on the slide. But there will be no IE or seek notes in the title or publication fields to alert anyone to the error in the information as it appears on the resource. The 500 field will be the only indication of that. Now, lastly, I want to take a second to mention federal documents because this can also present an issue. A common misunderstanding is that all federal documents are in the public domain. So anything with a MARC record coded F in the 008 fixed field should be safe. Now I have an example here of why this might not always be the case, and I'll make it a little bit bigger for you so hopefully you can see the record a little better. But this is a publication from the Smithsonian, coded F for federal document, and indeed the Smithsonian is a federal institution, so that's a correct designation. And you'll notice that this work was digitized and put in the HathiTrust Digital Library in 2011. But if you look for that work in HathiTrust, you'll find that you can only view the catalog record and do the limited search that Kristina mentioned earlier. The actual scanned images are locked down because this work is actually an exhibition catalog for an artist who exhibited at the Smithsonian in the mid-70s. So this work actually contains a lot of copyrighted material from that artist. So just because a document is coded as federal does not automatically mean that it's in the public domain. You can't just rely on that F designation in the 008 fixed field. So hopefully you can see from the examples I've shown that bibliographic records don't really make the most reliable sources of information for copyright reviews. Or at the very least, they don't contain all of the information necessary to make copyright determinations. Authority records are a better vehicle for this information because they're a central and accessible source of information about the author and can be linked to all related bibliographic records. Historically, though, birth and death dates and nationality information weren't included in authority records for creators with unique names who were unlikely to be confused with another author. So after we find this information in the course of the CRMS copyright review, we have to add that information to existing authority records in NACO. So now I'll take you through the process that we've implemented to update authority records with the information relevant to copyright reviews. And I'll begin by saying that some of our workflow is purely local and dependent somewhat on our interaction with the CRMS grant. So if you want to get involved in enhancing authority records or you are already at a NACO institution, your workflow will be customized to your local institution and could very well look a little bit different than ours. And we'll discuss a little later how to make the argument to get involved if you would like to. But in planning for the NACO pilot, as we refer to it here, the University of Michigan committed a small cadre of catalogers to update shared authority records with author death date information collected during CRMS copyright reviews. Now, at the moment, we only work with NACO records because those are the most commonly used for cataloging in U.S. institutions. And all participants in this project were already NACO certified. So on average, about 75 death dates are accumulated each month, and it takes us an estimated 15 minutes to update a single authority record in NACO. Now the work is divided up by spreadsheet in this initial phase, and each cataloger contributes a regular commitment of no less than 2 hours per week. And as we gain experience with this, we've been considering how to improve the mechanisms for making the work more efficient, since we are performing more copyright reviews currently than we are updating authority records. But this is an example of the information that a CRMS cataloger would pass along to or a CRMS reviewer would pass along to a NACO cataloger in order to create or update a NACO record. So a reviewer, as Kristina mentioned, has a volume open and checks all of the facts relevant to copyright. And if it's a work of personal authorship, we'll search for the relevant death dates if they're not already retrievable from the catalog record or VF through the automated searches. And several volunteer reviewers will keep spreadsheets as they work of author death dates that can be added to a record. And again, reviewers will attempt to find 2 sources of information with matching death dates for the author, along with nationality or associated place information if available. So what you see on the slide here is an example of the type of information that a CRMS reviewer would pass along to a NACO cataloger when they're ready to update the NACO records. So we have the author's name as it appears in the bibliographic record in HathiTrust, the title of the work, the date to be added, and then the two sources of information for that date. So each NACO cataloger receives a spreadsheet like this, and the first thing they do is search the Library of Congress name authority file through OCLC connection for all possible variations of the name. Because just because the author's name appears this way in the bib record in HathiTrust does not necessarily mean that's the same form of name that an existing NACO record is under. So we want to make sure that we find an existing NACO record if it's there. So I have here an example of a NACO authority record that we actually updated as part of the CRMS review process recently, and I'll take you through exactly what information we added to hopefully help us with copyright reviews in the future, and exactly how we've added it. So the first thing that we'll do if we find an existing authority record for the author is we will add a closing death date to a pre-existing birth date in the 100 field. Now we'll only do this if there's already an existing subfield D as part of the heading. If there isn't, we won't add a subfield D with birth year and death year. And that's simply according to Library of Congress policy. But what we will do every time regardless is add the date information to the 046 field. Now the 046 field is a new MARC field created specifically for RDA. And the reason we'll encode it here every time is because the 046 allows us to encode this data, again, which is very important for copyright determinations, in a machine-readable way. So that if another work by this author ever comes up in HathiTrust and we need to perform a copyright review, we now have a machine-readable way of accessing that information, thereby automating the search and saving us a lot of time and effort. We'll also add, if we have associated place information available, a 370 field with subfield C to designate that author's associated place. And of course, we'll try to use established headings whenever possible, noting the source in subfield 2. So in this case, that heading also comes from the name authority file. And then we will be sure to add 670 fields to add citations that support the information that we've added. And we'll use the subfield U to link to URLs as needed, because a lot of the sources that we cite for the information in the CRMS copyright reviews are online sources. So we'll go ahead and add that URL directly into the NACO record. And then, of course, since we have added RDA fields, the 046 and the 370, we'll remember to upgrade the record to RDA if it's not already by changing the rules fixed field to Z and adding a subfield E RDA to the 040 field. We'll also take any other steps necessary to make sure that the record is fully RDA compliant, but these steps are the ones that specifically relate to information relevant to copyright determination, so those are the ones that I wanted to focus on. Of course, catalogers are free to add additional information if it's available to them, such as references in 400 fields, occupations in the 374, fuller forms of name, etc. But what we're really most concerned with for copyright determinations are the death date, the associated place, and with documenting our sources. Now, if the name does not have an existing authority record in NACO, what we'll do is simply go ahead and create a new one for that author according to RDA rules and NACO and PCC guidelines. Again, making sure to include death date and domicile or nationality information if it's available to us. And I should note that the majority of authors that come through the CRMS review process do not have existing NACO records. So most of the time, we are creating records from scratch. But once those records have been created or existing records have been updated, we forward those on to the NACO liaison for review and bibliographic file management. Now, I do want to note quickly a couple of things regarding the sources that we cite in those 670 fields. I mentioned before that many of them are online sources, and on rare occasion, it doesn't happen often, but sometimes, between the time that the CRMS reviewer cites the source and the NACO cataloger gets around to creating or updating the NACO record, that online resource has either moved to a different URL or has disappeared from the web completely. So in that case, we will either need to track down that information again to the new URL where it's moved to, or find a new source completely to cite the information that we want to add. Also, I want to mention something that we didn't necessarily think of when we started this project, but on occasion we are able to find author death date information in other public domain works, oftentimes either in HathiTrust or Google Books. And I have an example here, which it's a little hard to read. It's a little small, but that doesn't really matter. I have an example here of one that we actually ran into recently for an author in HathiTrust named James Lynham Wilfred. He was an engineer who wrote, I believe, a work on steam engines. But we were actually able to find a reference to him in the Proceedings of the Institution of Electrical Engineers that was digitized and opened up as public domain in Google Books. And it just so happens that in the proceedings of this organization, they listed obituary notices for their members. So we were actually able to use this to cite the 670 for the death date and nationality information that we added to the record. So it's interesting that we've actually been able to use works in the public domain to help open up other works within the public domain. But I do want to stress that we are careful to always double check that the sources that we cite in the NACO records are reliable. Kristina mentioned the Library of Congress Resource Report, Search Strategies for Finding British Commonwealth Author Death Dates. But sometimes for more obscure authors, sources can be a little bit harder to find. And the line can sometimes be a little bit blurry between what's authoritative and reliable and what isn't. So if the NACO cataloger has any question about the reliability of the source, they'll set it aside for further research before they update or create that NACO record. So lastly, I just want to take a quick moment and talk about where we'd like to take this process in the future, how we'd like to enhance it. Because oftentimes we can't find death date information automatically, so CRMS reviewers have to do manual searches. But there is the possibility of helping to automate the search for death date and other relevant information, and even potentially the enrichment of the authority records themselves. Because currently finding that data is a very manual process oftentimes, searching different databases and sources one after the other. But more and more sources are becoming available through machine-readable and machine-actionable means, either through standard APIs or hopefully in the future in a more ideal environment as linked data with an endpoint that we could query. So if that's the case, it could significantly reduce the time and manual effort involved in the process of finding death date and nationality information. So with that, I'll pass it back to Kristina, who will talk to you a little bit about the impact that we hope that this has on the broader community and how you can get involved.
Thank you, Matt. So if you're thinking right now that this might be an interesting thing to talk about at your library, or that you might want to take forward, you're a cataloger and you would like to begin working on this, we have some ideas for you on how to talk about that. So as I mentioned before, rights and access issues are a primary concern for digital collection development. Having that metadata to support a copyright determination really helps to manage those collections and gives us a better idea of the rights landscape of the books that we have in our library collection. So taking the time to, additional time to enhance authority records with optional fields as you are adding required fields does have a large potential impact on the ability to identify public domain works. And as we showed you with that alert from VIAF indicating foreign authorship, data in authority records also has the ability to highlight resources that have questions regarding their copyright status. We've also thought, we've had a number of people ask us and are wishing we could develop a public domain predictor tool. So this would definitely be something that when somebody gets around to building it, it's going to be the coolest thing ever. But it's going to be dependent upon good data in authority records. So also we've had people talk about what would the possibilities be if you developed, if you approached aggregate digital collection development by taking authors that are already known to be in the public domain, finding out what holes we have in our collection of books that we do not have scanned, and then putting out a call for the community to contribute those books, and approaching digital collection development from that point of view. So, and one more thought that I have is about diversity in our digital collections and what we have in the public domain. So as I said before, our default for when lacking information is to wait until 140 years from date of publication. So what aspects of our cultural heritage are we less likely to be able to open up, or we lose decades where we could have them in the public domain, but we can't open them because we're lacking an author death date? So here's some of my ideas. You may have others. I think female authors may be more difficult to track down a death date. Definitely we see that people who travel, immigrants, definitely during World War II, there was a lot of movement of scholarly authors to the U.S. or to other countries, and that makes them a little bit more difficult to find and locate a death date. Definitely authors without strong ties to academia or who do not have a very strong publishing or scholarly record. Sometimes they're hobbyist publishers or self-publishing. Those can sometimes be more difficult to locate. So, you know, are we losing diversity in our public domain online materials by not having those people represented in authority records? So, ways that you can get involved. We encourage you to participate in enhancing authority data with information relevant to copyright in whichever way you can, particularly if your institution is a NACO institution. Or if you are able to collaborate with one. We know that there are some NACO funnels set up, and if you don't know what that is, you can look on the explanation of the NACO website and find one. Perhaps your state library would be able to set up a collaboration and take information to enhance an authority record. So as our bibliographic community increasingly broadens our range of expertise, we're becoming generalists over specialists, and we really need to rely upon each other to share expertise between institutions. So consider taking this pitch to your administration for either your library to become NACO certified or for you to be able to spend the extra time it takes to add optional fields to a NACO record. So what I've got here is an experiment that we're doing. We're giving you an access to a spreadsheet with over 100 author death dates that we've collected through the CRMS copyright review process. We have many, many more of these spreadsheets sitting right now that we have a backlog that we are not able to get to. We're going to see what happens, and if anybody is able to update an authority record, or if anybody has ideas on how they might participate or help with this, we'd be delighted to hear from you. If not, at minimum, you've got access to the sheet and you can see what we've collected and stuff like that. So we want to give a huge thank you to all the catalogers who have ever added a death date to an author authority record. You didn't realize it at the time, but you have helped open access to written materials all over the world. These are the URLs to our grant project websites, again, where I said our process and our white papers are located if you're interested in more. We're going to be answering questions now. So if Matt, you're able to go ahead and read off, go ahead and submit your questions if you have any for us.
I don't see any questions yet, but while people may be putting them in, I had a question. When you talked about an online source disappearing before the NACO authority record could be created or updated, who tracks down where it moved to or finds a new source? Is that the cataloger's job, or does it go back to the original reviewer of that spreadsheet?
Generally, the NACO cataloger will try first. Oftentimes, sometimes it's a database that has just sort of reorganized, or the URLs have changed slightly, so you kind of just have to start back at the beginning and retrace the steps to do that search within the database, and you'll find that information. So usually it only takes a couple minutes to track it down. If that's not the case, and for whatever reason it's just disappeared completely, we can't find it, then we will send that back to the CRMS reviewers to see if they can do some further research and find another source for us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so it looks like we have some other questions coming in. Does citizenship or nationality have a bigger impact?
Well, we take it nationality has an impact. However, also domicile at time of publication can have an impact. For example, a U.S. author living overseas at time of publication under GATT could also have copyright restored. So it's kind of all those things. It's a little bit complex, but it could be nationality as well as residency. And as I understand it, the RDA allows for better description of associated place at different times in an author's career.
Right. That's one of the great things about this 370 field. We most often use subfield C, which is designated as associated place, just because we can't find information specifically about where they were born, where they died, exactly where they live. We just know that they were in Great Britain, for instance. So we'll put subfield C as associated place Great Britain. But there are occasions where, especially with colonial Britain, where an author could have been born in India, moved to England in his early 20s, and then finally settled in South Africa and died, and maybe published different works, in both England and South Africa. In that case, there are different subfields in the 370 to note place of birth, place of death, residency, etc. So RDA does give us a lot more options that way.
So we have a question. Is there any chance that CRMS could become a NACO funnel itself? That is a very interesting question. Matt looks like he's going to answer that one.
It is a good question, and it's not one that I can necessarily answer for you right now, simply because I don't have that kind of pull. It's something that I think is would be really interesting to follow up on, and a little bit dependent on community interest. Kristina mentioned the backlog that we have currently, and we have, I believe, 50 CRMS reviewers and more on the way after training. Currently, we only have about 5 NACO catalogers, myself included, who are actually adding this information to the NACO records. So if other folks are interested in helping participate with this, please let us know, and we can see if we can make a pitch, or at least get a conversation started with the NACO folks at the Library of Congress.
And I also need to mention that even though we have over 50 people doing copyright reviews, we only have about 4 people actually volunteering and keeping these spreadsheets. So there are a lot of author death dates that we are not capturing, simply because this is still a pilot stage. We're still testing the waters. And even with only like 4 people doing this, we still have more than we can deal with right now. So we're looking at possible options and trying to explore things. It's a matter of resources and I think who we get connected with.
So we have another question. When you're trying to track down a URL that has disappeared, do you ever use the Wayback Machine, archive.org? Not really. That is an interesting option and something we might have to consider. I think we could potentially use that if we absolutely cannot find that information in another source. We would certainly like to cite in the 670s active URLs if possible, but I think that might be an option. So that's a good suggestion. It's something we'll have to talk about.
So another question is, how do you get NACO training for certification?
That is a process that your institution as a whole needs to go through. It's actually institutions that get NACO certified rather than individual catalogers. So you can make the pitch to your administration to become a NACO institution, and then you can work with or contact the folks in the NACO program at the Library of Congress if you're interested in that.
So is the Social Security Death Index of any use? Not to us right now, because in the U.S. There's not even the first time that our copyright law is based upon a life plus number of years formula would have been started, and I know I'm going to get the date wrong. It was sometime in the 1980s. So we won't be looking at that until very far down the road, but we will be looking at that at some point many generations after I'm already retired. So yes, I do think it's very important to talk about ORCID, author identifiers now, and about ISNIs, and about connecting that to better information on author vital statistics so that we have a good grasp in the future about what it is in the public domain. And I think if we do that planning now, it's going to be less difficult in the future the way it is now, where we just don't know stuff on our shelf, whether it's public domain or not, and how long it's going to take. I think there's a lot of preparatory work that we can do to prepare for that day when U.S. authors will start having that Life Plus 70 term coming into play.
So there's a comment here. I would love to participate, but I'm at a non-NACO library. There still are a couple of options if you'd like to participate as a non-NACO institution. You can either collaborate with sort of your local NACO institution if you have institutions nearby or that you partner with on a regular basis, and they are a NACO institution. You can provide them with author death dates and sources and other information that they can use to either create or enhance authority records. Or at the very least, if you are looking to do copyright reviews for your local materials, say you're trying to digitize them and make them available online, you can even put that information in your local authority records just to help out you locally with your own copyright reviews.
Okay, so we need to wrap up now, and if there are remaining questions, we will answer them offline.
Okay, thank you, Matt and Kristina, for your engaging presentation on authority records and copyright determination. Thank you to all of our attendees. Just one second. We hope you found today's session useful. You will soon receive a short online evaluation form. Please take a few minutes to respond to the questions and return the form to us. Your comments are very valuable and help the ALCTS committee plan new continuing education offerings. Information about all ALCTS webinars can be found on the ALCTS homepage. 3 more webinars are on the calendar for this year, and we have already started planning webinars for 2015. Please check out our web courses, and you can sign up for our monthly e-forms. Suggestions for webinars and other continuing education opportunities are welcome at any time. Please contact any member of the ALCTS committee or submit a proposal for a webinar using the online form on the ALCTS webpage under Online Learning. I would like to thank Julia Hess for providing technical support for today's webinar. The support she and her colleagues on the Technical Support Subcommittee provide make it possible for us to present these webinars smoothly. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and we hope you will participate in other ALCTS for continuing education offerings again in the future.